more than 25 years, I've been helping companies grow, find new markets, and building success for the world's top food brands. This has been done even in times of a weak economy. I hope my thoughts are helpful in your growth and success.
Hello, we're here with Nancy Ash, owner of StrictlyOliveOil.com. And Nancy, thank you very much for being with us today. And we look forward to learning about your education and the information that you have available for us regarding the new rules that are going into effect, olive oil that is sold and imported into the United States. We met, Nancy, in regards to olive oil and your efforts with the USDA, and I'm fascinated with what you're doing and the education that you're doing with olive oils and what's happening with olive oils. Would you like to share a little bit about yourself and what's going on with you and education with consumers and olive oils?
Sure, I'd love to. I have a background in sales and marketing of specialty foods and had the privilege of selling some exquisite Italian extra virgin olive oils a number of years ago. Through that, found a number of Californians who were just starting to develop their own olive oil sales plans and was trained as a taster. Most people don't realize that there's a science and art to olive oil tasting, much like we associate with wine tasting. And in Europe, where about 75% of the world's olive oil comes from, they've developed a system for assessing olive oil based on the quality of the flavor. There are elements in olive oil called flavor defects. And the scientific term for them are negative attributes. There are a lot of reasons that these defects occur in olive oil, but if you haven't been trained to recognize them as a defect, you just may think it's a flavor that you like or you dislike.
Nancy, what are the main, when you mention defects, can you share with us the basic defects of olive oil that will deteriorate the quality and drop it below extra virgin olive oil?
Well,
from the international standard?
The most common defect that we find is rancidity. And rancidity is the oxidation of the oil. All oils eventually become rancid, and this is because of the molecular structure of the olive oil molecule. But without going back to high school science, if you leave your oil open and oxygen gets to it, if you leave it exposed to oxygen, exposed to heat, exposed to light, over time that oil will pick up an off flavor that we recognize as rancidity. If we taste an oil that's rancid, that's a defect, and that oil should not be sold as an extra virgin olive oil. Another common defect is called fusty. And fusty happens if the olive has waited too long between being harvested from the tree and being pressed into oil in the mill. And what we taste is a flavor that we identify as fusty, but that flavor comes from the fermentation of the olive because it's been sitting too long before it's pressed, and it's not a fresh olive anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There are other defects. They're not as common, but those are the two defects that I have recognized in a lot of oils that I buy from the supermarket.
So if I go to Europe, or if I'm in Europe or Italy, do they sell olive oil that is has some sort of designation other than extra virgin olive oil?
If you go to Europe, the European Union and the top olive oil producing countries that are in the European Union all define extra virgin as meeting certain quality parameters. Some of these are tested in a lab by instruments, and some of them are tested by a trained taste panel. The reason that you have people tasting them for defects is that there are no scientific instruments that can actually measure these defects in any kind of reliable way. So we've had to rely on trained tasters to tell us whether oils have defects in it or not. If your oil is produced and sold in a country that is part of the European Union or part of the International Olive Council, you are required to adhere to certain standards when you label your olive oil. So that means that extra virgin means it has certain qualities to it, and it's free of flavor defects. There's also a category called virgin olive oil, and that means basically that the oil is slightly defective. May not be so defective that it bothers most people. They'll still use it the same way. But since it's not considered to be of as high a quality as extra virgin, on the market it doesn't fetch as high a price as extra virgin. In the same countries that follow these standards, if the oil isn't good enough to be called virgin or extra virgin, then that oil needs to be refined to take out the defect that's in it. And that oil is sold as pure olive oil, which most of the U.S. consumers are familiar with. That's mostly what's sold in the U.S. Most likely that product is different because the United States is not a member of the International Olive Council. So the standards that are set by this council are not standards that have any weight in the U.S. market. What this means is that producers in Europe can bottle as extra virgin something that meets the international standards, and they can bottle for the U.S. market an oil that does not meet these standards and still put the words extra virgin on that bottle. Right now, for the consumer to know anything, I'd say the best thing for a consumer to do is to purchase olive oil from a store that actually lets you taste the olive oil. This is true of a lot of the smaller specialty food stores around the country, but unfortunately it's not true of the chain stores where so many Americans do their shopping. The second thing that the consumer can do is look for an extra virgin certification seal that's offered from the California Olive Oil Council. Now, this is a small program because it's limited to California producers who belong to the California Olive Oil Council, but those oils are tested in a lab and tasted by trained tasters, and if the seal is on the bottle, that means that the oil is free of defects.
So if I just go to the grocery store and purchase extra virgin olive oil, you think it's very likely that much of that there will be flavor defects, even though it comes from, say, Europe. It's quite possible.
It is quite possible, and it's unfortunate that so much of the supermarket extra virgin olive oil should not be labeled as such according to international standards. There was a study that was recently published by the UC Davis Olive Center, and in their study, 69% of the oils that they purchased in a supermarket, imported oils that were in a supermarket, were found to be not of extra virgin quality.
Oh, wow.
That's a huge number. And these are national brands. They're available throughout the U.S., and most consumers, unfortunately, don't recognize the flavor of defects. And they just think that what they're tasting is what olive oil is supposed to taste like.
What is the process for tasting olive oil and searching out for flavor defects? And this is something I think that you've actually run taste panels.
Well, I've been trained as a taste panel leader. This is something that's required if you have a panel that gets recognized by the International Olive Council. I'm not on a recognized panel currently. I have been in the past, but there were a number of Californians who went to be trained in Italy in 2005 because we want to help educate and lead towards the better quality olive oils and to educate consumers so that they know about what makes a high quality extra virgin olive oil.
For running taste panels, are there any learnings from running taste panels that people in other industries can use? For instance, if you wanted to compare different ice creams, are there techniques and strategies that you use in running taste panels that are appropriate to use in other categories, or is this specifically limited to olive oil? Your training and what you work with as far as taste panels?
Well, the first thing that we do when we train taste panel tasters is to see if they have the ability, the sensitivity to taste when there's just a very slight amount of flavor. And you can look up research that's been done on super tasters, and you'll understand what I'm referring to. About 20 to 25% of the population physically has more taste buds on their tongues, and this allows them to be more sensitive to a spectrum of flavors. So you need first to be able to identify if a person is a super taster, to know whether you can train their palate in a way that they can detect these defective flavors in olive oil. After that, I think that would be true of anyone on any sensory panel tasting any kind of food. It needs to be someone who has more taste buds, who's more sensitive to flavors, in order to be able to give you a lot more information about what it is that they're tasting. But I haven't been trained in sensory science per se. I've just been trained in the sensory assessment of olive oil. And what we do is that we take sips of olive oil from blue glasses, and in this way we're not interfering with the oil's flavor by tasting it with bread or another food. We're not looking at the color of the olive oil, which doesn't give you an indication of its flavor or its quality. So you don't want to get a preconceived idea before you taste the oil of what you think it's going to taste like if it's a certain color. And it's a controlled sensory laboratory setup that we're in order to give scientific responses to the oil as we're tasting it.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share today? Any other comments about olive oil tasting and programs?
I think the best way for people to learn about olive oils is to taste as many olive oils as possible. And I found that the only way you can truly compare flavors of olive oil is to taste them without food. So I've actually written articles in the past where I tell people how to set up an informal tasting at home using wine glasses, getting a few different oils, or having people bring their favorite oils to your house and tasting them side by side so that you start to notice the differences between olive oils. If you're lucky enough to have a trained taster with you, they may be able to tell you if you have a defect in front of you or not. But even without a trained taster with you, you can still notice the differences in oil when you sip them in that manner, as opposed to cooking with them, where you start to get distracted by the other ingredients that you're using.
Well, thank you very much. Can you share your website and maybe any other resources you'd like to share with people that are listening right now?
Well, there are lots of good resources on the Internet. My website is www.strictlyoliveoil.com. Another good source of information is the California Olive Oil Council website, and that is COOC.com. And you can also find a lot of information through the Olive Center at UC Davis, and you can search them online. I don't have their web address right in front of me.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for your time and information today, and we appreciate you sharing so much about olive oils and qualities of olive oil and tasting olive oil, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks. It's my pleasure to share this information with everyone who's interested.